Hey Mama, today I'm here to tell you about the birth story of my daughter, Branham. This is my 39-week labor induction story. Last week I told you the birth story of my son, Jack, and about all of the emotions and the craziness that came with finally giving birth to a living child after losing 4 pregnancies. Well, giving birth to Branham was completely different in so many ways, indicative of what different humans they are already, and she's only 5 months old. I'm Katie Huey Harrison, founder and editor-in-chief of Undefining Motherhood. We're an educational site and community equipping you with the knowledge and information you need to do this mom thing your own way. And I'm really excited to share this story with you today because it's such a different experience to give birth when you've done so before and you've done so healthily and you know that this is something your body can do. There was so much less fear. There was so much less anxiety. When I was induced at 37 weeks with my son Jack, I honestly thought, what's happening? What's wrong with me? Why is my body not working properly? I had preeclampsia and I felt like I had done something to deserve that, which, hey, newsflash, I had not. And if that's you, you have not either. With my daughter, my induction wasn't something that felt out of control and forced upon me. It was actually somewhat elective. I say somewhat because I was in high-risk care. My entire pregnancy, I was 36 years old, and so I was of advanced maternal age, and I also had a number of other risk factors, including an immune deficiency that needed to be monitored throughout my entire pregnancy. So for a variety of reasons, my high-risk specialist had said, I would like to induce you at 39 weeks if you make it that far this time. After a 37-week induction from preeclampsia, which I told you all about last week, that sounded great by me. I had so much anxiety this pregnancy. I had expected that the anxiety would be gone. I had finally done this pregnancy after loss thing and I knew it could turn out okay for me. And I thought the anxiety would be better. In many ways, it was much, much, much worse. If you're struggling with this, with the pregnancy after loss is so hard, go check out my videos on pregnancy after miscarriage and dealing with pregnancy anxiety because they're really helpful and give you a glimpse into a lot of the useful tools that I worked with my therapist to create to get through these tough times. As I neared 39 weeks, I was an anxious mess and I really wanted this baby out of me. I talked to my therapist a lot about how I felt like she was safer out of my body than in my body, but no one on my medical team agreed. And I just kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I had had preeclampsia with Jack. Where was the preeclampsia? Where was the terrifying diagnosis? Why wasn't it coming? I knew to be thankful that it wasn't coming, and yet I just felt like we're missing something. So at my 39-week appointment, well, no, it was my 38-week appointment, my OB said, I will recommend you for induction next week if you want me to. And I said, yes, please. I want this baby out. Which was so fascinating because with Jack, I really hadn't wanted to need to be induced. And with Branham, I was like, just get her here. Come on, let's make this happen. Induction actually felt more controlled to me because I had walked this path and I had seen it succeed. And so that's what I wanted again. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't what I expected. And I think that's a really key lesson we have to have in mind when we're thinking about labor. Expect the unexpected. Prepare for things to go differently than you planned because they can, and it can be really upsetting when it happens. And for me, it was not a lasting upset, but I will say for the first couple of weeks, it bothered me that this labor didn't go the way I wanted it to. So I'll tell you about it. I think it'll be healing to get to talk about it some. So at 39 weeks, I was being induced. I had been trying everything to induce myself naturally. None of it was working. And so they told me I was giving birth at this point at the height of the Omicron surge of COVID. So hospitals were overcrowded. Staff was out of work. They were massively understaffed because everybody had Omicron. I had already been to the hospital twice because of high blood pressure. I had gone in at 37.5 weeks convinced that I was having a baby because my blood pressure was high, and I knew my high-risk specialist would induce me if I checked in at the hospital with high blood pressure. But by the time they checked it, it had gone down. So I was able to keep her in for another week and a half until I chose to be induced. So I was told, you're on the schedule to be induced. They could call you starting on this night. I think it was Thursday night. But it very well might not be until later. It might be a few days later. If you haven't gotten in by Monday, give us a call. This took away so much of the control that I had been seeking with induction. Like, what? You're giving me a day and telling me it could be up to a week later? That's insane. But that's what we were working with. So honestly, I was stunned when they called me the first night that it was possible to be induced. Because while it was sort of an elective induction, there were a lot of medical reasons to induce. And so I was at that point triaged higher on the list. So they called me to come in, and I was so excited. I was eating dinner when they called. I had been making freezer meals for 2 days, and I was having chicken and dumplings, and my phone rang. And my mom was like, hey, she had already come in case. So my mom was staying with Jack, our older son, while I gave birth. And my mom had already come, knowing that we could be called in that night. And so she was just here for however long. And we were eating, and she was like, Katie, you've got to finish your dinner. And I was like, I can't finish my dinner. I'm going to have a baby. And so my appetite completely went away. This has been a theme for me. When I'm about to have a baby, I cannot eat food. I was so worried during my pregnancy with Jack about going through labor and not being able to eat, because my hospital still follows that rule where you can't eat once you're in labor. Believe me, I never wanted to eat at any point during this process. So we left to go to the hospital with Branham. We got checked in. I thought we were going to follow the exact same protocol that we had followed with Jack. They were going to give me a cervical ripening agent at night. I was going to sleep all night long and get restful, peaceful sleep. And then I was going to wake up and start Pitocin and have a baby. And it was going to be this wonderful, delightful, empowering experience. It was going to be hard, don't get me wrong. I knew it was painful and it was going to be difficult. But my experience with Jack that I told you about last week, it was so empowering to me and so healing for me after a history of fertility trauma and loss, to feel like my body was doing this laboring thing so well. Like I was coping with the pain so well. And that's what I was expecting. And when you go in with high expectations, I guess they're just bound to be dashed. So if I tell you my labor story in short, what everyone says is, oh, that's amazing. You had this really fast labor. How awesome. But it was so against my expectations and it was so painful. That is not how it felt to me. So here's what happened. First, we got settled in our room. They put me on monitors. Very much to my surprise, they told me that I was contracting 8 minutes apart, but I couldn't feel the contractions yet at this point. So I was already in a somewhat active labor, but I wasn't really actively laboring. I could not yet feel these contractions. We don't know how long this would have lasted on its own. But because of that, rather than give me the milder cervical ripening agent and let me go to sleep, the doctor on call said, I think this baby's going to come sooner, and I'm assuming I don't know the thought process, but I'm assuming the thought process was, we can make this room available for another mom, so let's go ahead and get you moving. So instead, what they wanted to do was they wanted to give me Cytotec, which is something that is used to help induce labor, and they then wanted to wait 6 hours and then start Pitocin. Okay. Well, with Jack, I had refused Cytotec. I had said only Cervidil, because Cytotec was a medication I had some trauma with from my miscarriage history. With Branham, I looked at the nurse and I said, I'm really stunned that I'm not telling you no right now. I had written in my birth plan, but birth plans are meant to be a template, not the be-all end-all, that I didn't want Cytotec. But I'm weirdly okay with it while you're talking about it right now. So that's fine. Sure, give me Cytotec. So they gave me Cytotec orally, so it can be given different ways. I don't know all of the rules about what is done, but the choice was made for me to take it orally. And so I took this Cytotec, and then I tried to go to sleep. Now, it was already harder to go to sleep than it was with Jack, because with Jack, there was no sign of labor, and here I knew I was contracting, even though I wasn't feeling the contractions yet. Also, with Jack, I believe they gave me some sort of sleep aid to help me sleep, and with Branham, I don't think that was a thing that was offered to me, and I didn't ask for one, which had also been part of my plan, to ask for one, because they were going to start the Pitocin 6 hours later. So I was given the Cytotec at 10 p.m. They were going to start the Pitocin at 4 a.m. So I was like, they can't give me sleeping medicine because I have to be able to wake up. So the plan for rest was pretty thwarted to begin with. Then around midnight, I started really contracting. So I pulled out my phone and I used the tracking app, the contraction tracker, that's supposed to help tell you when to go to the hospital. Because I wanted to know, am I in labor? Like, I've never been in non-Pitocin induced labor. Am I in labor? Should I go to the hospital for this? So I am tracking this, and of course my tracker app is like, you need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, I'm already in the hospital, so now what? Like, tell me more. I want more information about what's happening here. So I'm a perpetual student, and I was like, I want to follow this. I want to read my monitors. I want to know everything that's happening. But of course, I don't know how to read everything that was happening, so it didn't really work as well as I'd have liked. So I'm really contracting, and I had been planning to ask for an enema because I had had one with Jack, and there had been no poop when he was born. I forgot to mention that in last week's video, so good thing to know if you wanted to know that. But I didn't have time with this one. So around 12:30, I start really contracting. I'm tracking it around midnight. Around 12:30, I feel what feels like I have peed on myself. And this is not on, so, okay, bear with me here, a little graphic. This is not an uncommon feeling for me at this point. So it's my second pregnancy. I now know that I have prolapse, although whether I had it at the time, I don't know. I had the flu and a really terrible cough, so I'd already been in diapers. I was used to this feeling of like coughing and urine just streaming out. I kept telling my husband I felt like subhuman, but that was the thing I was used to. So when this happened at 12:30, I was like, wait, did I just pee during a contraction or did my water break? And I've always been told you would know when your water broke. And I definitely knew something had happened, but I wasn't sure at that point which it was. So I buzzed the nurse and she came in and I was like, hey, either I just peed myself or my water broke. And she was like, all right, let's see. So I don't know what she was looking for. But she asked me, she pulls up my gown and is looking at my pad that's sitting underneath me. And she asked me to cough. And when I cough, she's like, oh, that's your water. So I thought my water had fully broken. Then a few minutes later, it fully broke. And I realized, oh, okay, so that was a partial break before there, right? When it really totally breaks, you definitely know. And I was really unprepared for what this was like because with Jack, they had manually broken my water right before they gave me an epidural. So I had wanted with Jack to be up and moving until 5 centimeters to try to prevent labor from stalling. So that was my plan again. Well, what I didn't understand was just how messy and difficult it is when your water has broken. So I was still able to do that, but it was a lot less fun. This time, fun's the wrong word when you're having contractions. I know, but like, it felt ickier. I didn't enjoy it as much. Also, I was having back labor. So with Jack, the labor pain, yes, there was pain in my back, but most of the labor was in my front. This was a completely different pain. So I woke my husband up because he had managed to fall asleep. And I mean, he probably slept 3 hours and he was woken up at least 4 times in those 3 hours. So he didn't get a lot of rest, but he had fallen asleep some. So I woke him up and I sent him to the car to get my birthing ball because my hospital had said they had them. But then when I asked for one, they discovered that they were out. They were all in use. So thank goodness I had one in my car because this was an absolute lifesaver for me. It was my favorite tool with Jack. It was my favorite tool again with Branham. With Jack, I put it on a counter and I kind of danced with it. With Branham, I actually sat on the birthing ball and I bounced and I swayed and I rolled lots of like figure 8 kind of circles, and I was leaned over onto my hospital bed having this back labor and trying to work through that. And so then I called the nurse in and I said, hey, I need you to check me. And she was like, we really don't like to check you very much once your water has broken. And I was like, I know, but I need you to check me. I feel like things are moving here and I don't want to request an epidural until I'm at 5 centimeters. And I feel like I might be. I don't honestly know how long I had been in labor at this point, but I would say no more than 2 hours. Or at least no more than 2 hours since I had started actively feeling those contractions. So she checked me and she was like, yeah, you're 4.5 centimeters. I can stretch you to 5. And I was like, all right, do that. And then tell them to go get that epidural. And this is where things really went downhill. I had a plan and I thought that this was going to look just like Jack's labor. But if you watched that video last week, then what you know is, one, before I was in labor with Jack, I slept all night long. I had not slept a wink at this point. It's the middle of the night and my body is not doing what I thought it would be doing, and it is having a baby. And that's great in theory, but it did not feel great to me. I felt very out of control. So the anesthesiologist came in. She gave me the epidural. When I had an epidural with Jack, and I talked about this last week, I had a little bit of a hot spot where on my stomach and this kind of long line, the epidural didn't work. But with Jack, we were able to fix it. The anesthesiologist came back in, they moved something around. I don't know what they adjusted, but they did something. They twisted my body all sorts of different ways. And after about 30 minutes, everything was working fully and it was a good epidural. Well, this time I got another one of those hot spots, but it was much, much bigger than with Jack's. It was like a whole, like with Jack, it was like a line, like the width of my finger. With Branham, it was like this wide. And because I was having back labor, it hurt so much in my back. And when I told them where it hurted, I pointed apparently to the site of the epidural, the catheter. This really freaked out the anesthesiologist who was on call. And when I pointed to that location to show her the pain, and I could not feel that that's where the epidural was. I had no idea that's what I was pointing to. And honestly, I'm not even convinced it was related. But when that's where I pointed, my husband says that this anesthesiologist, just her eyes got really wide. I was in so much pain. I have no idea what she looked like. I was not really even looking at her. But he said her eyes widened, and then we both remember so vividly her saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I've never seen this before. There's nothing I can do. Which in hindsight makes me very angry. And I've had words with my hospital about it. And she walked to the edge of the room and she apologized to the nurse and said, I'm so sorry to leave you with this. There's nothing I can do. And she walked out of the room. And I felt trapped and claustrophobic and helpless. Because here I was, stuck in bed, unable to work through the pain, unable to move through the pain, because I can't feel my legs or the left half of my body. And yet this pain in my back at that epidural site and on the front was so intense. And so I rolled over onto my right side in hopes that the epidural would kind of drip down there. Every time I was allowed to push the button to get more, I got more. But that just meant that I was getting strong relief everywhere else, so strong that I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't feel pressure even, which with Jack, I felt so much pressure. I talked about that last week. But I'm in so much pain. And what I wanted to do was move through the pain. And the fact that I couldn't made me feel so out of control, but so trapped. And I was screaming and I was making these terrible guttural noises. And I've since told my husband on either 3 or 4 different occasions, I talked myself out of saying, just put me under and give me a C-section. Like, just anesthetize me fully. I don't want to do this anymore. And this only lasted for half an hour. So it was so intense and it was so scary and so upsetting. And then finally the nurse was like, look, with the amount of pain you're describing, I'm going to check you again. I feel like you need to push. And so she checked me and she was like, this is it, just to push. And I was like, I cannot push until we make this work. What can we do? And she was like, honey, what is going to make it better is to get this baby out of you. Just push. And the doctor was in less than a minute and a half. And I pushed Branham out in 2 pushes. And that pain instantly went away. But then, hey, buddy, come here. I have a visitor. Come here.
What?
I am making a video. I just made one where I talked about how you were born, and now I'm making one talking about how Branham was born, and I'm almost done. Do you want to hear it?
Wait, yep.
What?
Yep.
Yep, you want to hear it? Okay.
Yeah.
This is Jack. Can you say hi?
Hi.
And he loves his thumb. And this is George. Hello, George. And so after Branham came out, just like Jack was whisked away from me for his low blood pressure. Branham was, this is recording videos as a mom, friends. Branham was also taken away, and this time it was much scarier because she was not retaining oxygen. Again, she was only sent to transitional care, not to the NICU, but they had to have her on a CPAP for a little while. And I was really coming down from that terrible epidural experience. I got really freezing cold. My body started shaking. And then I would like almost pass out. Like when I say fall asleep, that doesn't quite cover it. I would like pass out and then I would wake up and be like, where's the baby?
Mommy?
Is she okay? Yes, I was okay.
Is the camera your new friend?
Yes, the camera is my new friend. And it was a rough go in that postpartum just few hours as well. But we made it back up to our room. Everything stabilized. And baby girl got to come be with us. I hope this story has been helpful for you. I know it might be hard to hear if you're preparing for birth, but I hope you know that whatever happens, if you have a care team, you and your care team, you can get through it. You can make it okay. For more content where I help you with everything you need to know to make parenting your own way just a little bit easier and better informed, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Like this video, send Jack a hello.
Make sure to give it a thumbs up if you like it, or a thumbs down if you don't like it.
This is a kid who watches YouTube, y'all. A thumbs up if you like it. And let's just skip the thumbs down because those don't make anybody feel good, right?
Right.
All right. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.
George!
Bye. Can you say bye?
Bye!